up and sit down.
And welcome to episode number 3 of Janessa After Dark. I am your hostess with the mostest, Miss Janessa J. Champagne, and today I have a very special treat for all of the fans of blood and guts and gore and independent horror movies. My interview subject, who you'll meet a little bit later, has been busy traveling to different Days of the Dead conventions, showing off her first film, as well as making the sequel to that film, a holiday-themed horror delight that will be available later this year just in time for all of your Christmas gift giving. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about making it happen. What do I mean by that? Well, by the end of this podcast, I'm probably going to start to sound like a rerun of those old Nike commercials. Just do it. I meet a lot of people who are interested in trying out drag, but don't know where to begin. They don't feel like their particular style or what they have to offer is of any value to the drag world. They worry that they're not going to have the right look. They're not going to be able to buy the right things, and that they won't be able to be successful. And what I always tell those people is to make sure that you try, that you do your best, and that you make sure that your performance is true to who you are. If your style of drag, if your characterization has value to you, there are going to be people out there that it resonates with. If you give yourself a chance, you will find your audience. It's not always easy, but you do it anyway. When I was first starting out, there weren't any drag shows to perform in Grand Forks, North Dakota, but I certainly didn't let that stop me. In those days, let me tell you, I had seen the softer side of Sears, and I would get dressed up in whatever sad clearance dress I found, put on a $5 tinsel wig from Spencer Gifts, throw a little bit of Walmart makeup on my face, and I would just go to house parties. I knew a lot of artsy people, a lot of people who were in bands, and they used to all invite me to their parties because they knew I would come, I would drink too much, I would have a good time, I would keep people laughing, and I would probably make more than a few straight boys uncomfortable. When our local campus group, the 10% Society, started putting on drag shows, I really got to refine my drag character. I started to think more about who she was, what type of songs she would perform, how would she dress to perform them. And I really had to think about what did it mean to build a persona and what did it mean to build this character when it seemed like the options for a drag queen in Grand Forks, North Dakota in the late 90s, early 2000s were less than extremely limited. They were non-existent. What it meant is that I figured out very quickly that if I wanted opportunities, I had to make them for myself. And I think this is something that can benefit people who are interested in any sort of artistic pursuit, not just the art of drag. If you don't see the type of art that you want to have in your community, then make it. I truly believe that if it resonates with you, you will find others that it resonates for. And if your dream is to make a YouTube channel or create a podcast, to start a blog or to write a book, we live in a world where those types of creative activities are much easier to accomplish on your own and with very little outside assistance. You can set up a free blogging site. You can self-publish books through the Kindle program at Amazon. You can create a podcast with a microphone, a computer, and some free software. You can create a YouTube channel with a cheap camera or even the camera on your cell phone. And the means to promote and distribute those creative products once you've made them are right at your fingertips. There are always going to be challenges. There are always going to be times where you feel like you can't do it. You don't have enough skill. You don't have enough time. I know all of those excuses because they were the excuses that I told myself. I told myself that there was no way I could find the time to put together a podcast, this thing that I had been dreaming of for years. And once I decided that I could carve out the time, I told myself that I didn't have the skills. Once I found all of the YouTube tutorials I could ever need and downloaded the free software, I got to the hardest excuse to overcome. What if you're just not good enough? And what if you don't deserve this? We live in a very strange culture right now, in a world saturated with reality television that is nothing like reality, led by that awful tribe of Wookiees, the Kardashians, and their fake plastic lifestyles. We have this dual pressure that tells us that nothing is more important than the individual. Nothing is important than our own perspective, but at the same time tells us that our perspective does not have value if it doesn't meet those artificial standards of beauty, of wealth and affluence, of proper presentation of your gender, of appropriate sexuality, which leaves us with this feeling that nothing is more important than the individual, and as individuals, we are just not good enough. Part of being a creative person, part of being a content creator or an artist, is believing and having faith that you are good enough, that you do have something to say, something that is worth putting out into the world, and that when you do, you will find your audience, you will find your tribe. And I can tell you from my own experience, if you put your work out there and you do it with integrity, and you do it in a way that is true to yourself and doesn't compromise, then the hard work really won't feel like work at all. Now, I had been performing in drag shows for about a year when in 2002, I decided to start my own production company, Champagne Dreams Productions. Now, what that meant, I didn't have any employees, I didn't have a secretary, I didn't have an office. I had a computer and I had some cheap business cards from Vistaprint. And I had the fragile belief that I had something to offer. Through Champagne Dreams Productions, I eventually started hosting shows for the 10% Society in Grand Forks, as well as for the I-Beam nightclub in Moorhead. Soon I was also hosting individual events like fundraisers, an awards ceremony for the local roller derby teams, and even a short-lived Valentine's Day dragogram delivery service. And really, I was able to grow my personal brand just by saying yes. If an opportunity came up, as long as it felt like it was something that was true to who I was and what I was trying to do, I said yes. Because every time I said yes, that put my name and my face in front of new people, new audiences that might connect and support my work as a whole. Now, as I've gotten more experience and I've made more connections and I've become more active, I've had new opportunities. I currently direct and host the drag shows for the Dakota Outright organization in Bismarck, which is a fantastic opportunity for me to do outreach to new communities. In the last year, I've started hosting midnight movies. And of course, we have this podcast, Janessa After Dark. None of these things existed before. And to be very frank, none of these things were just handed to me. They were all things that I sought out. I put in the work, I put the intention out into the universe, and I built this from the ground up. And I promise you, there's nothing unique, there's nothing special about me that allows me to do this, but wouldn't allow you to do exactly the same thing. So if you're listening and you have some sort of creative project that you've always wanted to tackle, I say just do it. Just get to work. Just start. There's nothing wrong with starting. Take it piece by piece and give up this idea that it has to be perfect. Accept that when you first start, it might be kind of small. There have been some adventures that I've tried that I think the audience was Mama Champagne and my friends Angie and Melanie. But I tried them and I learned from them and I grew. And it really helped me figure out what was going to work for me and what wouldn't. And if you think that you can't do it alone, you're right. People are always going to need help and they're going to need support, but you have to be willing to ask for it. The people who are out there who will support you are not going to seek you out. They're not going to find you sitting on your couch, eating a bag of Doritos, watching Stranger Things on Netflix, and thinking about what you could do instead of doing what you can do. They're not going to track you down. You have to ask them. You have to put it out there. And some people might say no. There are going to be times where people aren't able to help you, or they aren't able to support you at that moment. And that's fine. But look for somebody else. Because people who do creative work, certainly there are some of them that fear new creative people, that worry about the competition. But most of the creative people that I've found are so giving and loving and willing to share and willing to help that if you just give them the chance, they would be more than happy to help you with whatever it is you're trying to achieve. So whether you're thinking about strapping on some fake boobs, getting some big hair and hitting the stage for the first time, or whether you've always dreamed about writing, or you think you're the next YouTube star, whatever it is, just do it. Make that opportunity happen. And once you do, don't forget about all of those people that helped you get there. And I hope, for the sake of karma, you'll be willing to return the favor when the next generation of creative people come knocking on your door. All right, Champagne Dreamers, if that wasn't enough to put you in the mood to make all of your dreams come true, I know that our next guest absolutely will. She is the queen of Just Do It, and she's turning the idea of low-budget horror with quality on its ear. Now, in my humble but totally biased opinion, the best place out there right now for horror fans is the Days of the Dead Horror Convention. They host several shows a year in Indianapolis, Louisville, Kentucky, Atlanta, Georgia, and Chicago. Next year, they're hosting their first event in Charlotte, North Carolina, and they live up to their motto, where the dead go to party. On my most recent trip to Days of the Dead Indianapolis, I met a fantastic filmmaker named Brooklyn Ewing. Last year, she completed her first independent horror film, She Was So Pretty, with a $0 budget. Using the tools and resources she had at her disposal, being willing to ask for help, and being open to collaboration allowed her to create a truly unforgettable horror film experience and a new icon of horror in the form of serial killer Alfie, played by Jerry LaRue. Despite having some obvious technical problems, the film has been warmly received by horror fans and critics alike, and not only has it been part of the Days of the Dead Film Festival over the last year, it was also featured at the Nightmares Film Festival, where Brooklyn won the Best Director Award. She's a talented creative force, she has a true love of the genre, and she has lovingly embraced her inner weirdo. I'm very excited to welcome to Janessa After Dark, independent director from Dirt Candy Productions, Brooklyn Ewing. Enjoy! How are you doing?
Oh, gosh. Besides this weather debacle, it's been really good.
Yeah, your lights are on.
I have literally every light in my house on, just soaking it in.
Just because you've been away from it for so long.
Mm-hmm. It's incredible.
That's so exciting. I'm so glad that we are finally getting a chance to do this.
Yeah, it's been 4 days of pure frustration.
I hear ya. The weather has been crazy here too, and I tell you, this is like a thing that we joke about whenever I do a show in Bismarck, which is the state capital. Every time we go, literally every time we go, there's some sort of weather event. If it's winter, there's a snowstorm, there's a blizzard, there's something, there's fucking freezing rain, some kind of shit going on. If it's summertime, there's tornado warnings, there's trees down, the power goes out.
Tornadoes are scary. I don't like it.
So it happens every time, and it becomes this joke, and I always talk about the Republican weather wizards, and now they're starting to fuck up other parts of my life, so I'm not okay with that.
I laughed so hard when I read that. I was like, oh, weather wizard. Ooh, that's hilarious.
Damn it. Let's jump right into it. Let's just do it. So just tell me a little bit more about you, because I didn't get to talk to you too much at the conventions. Just tell me more about you.
Well, I didn't start out as a filmmaker, that's for sure. I actually went to college in West Virginia at WVU. I was going to study forensic psychology, and then I went to like this see what your career is going to be like kind of thing, and I realized I can't look at blood, like real blood. It kind of makes me like really like pass out. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll do something else.
That could be a challenge, yeah.
And so I went into advertising, and that's not even related at all. So I got out of school and I moved back home. I was like, I'm going to get a job at advertising. And I was like, oh, wait, I live in Parkersburg, West Virginia. I'm not getting a job in advertising. So I was like, what do I do? So I became an interior decorator. And then I worked in a sign shop. I was I can't think of what they're called, at a hotel where I dealt with a bunch of snooty assholes for a really long time, planning parties, event planning and crap. And I hated that. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take pictures forever. So I started doing photography. That had been something I was decent at, decided to stick to it. Then I was like, you know, I'm gonna make a movie. So now I'm a photographer full time and a filmmaker the other days of the week that I can find time to do it.
I love that. She Was So Pretty is your first movie.
Yeah.
How did you decide to make a horror movie? Have you always loved horror movies?
Yes. Probably, I don't want to say the only genre I like. I like other movies, but since I was young, like my mom was very open with me. She's like, they're scary, there's monsters, but none of it's real. You know, she's like, boogeyman's fake. And she let me watch whatever I wanted. So we watched scary movies together. She's always been a horror movie person and a movie person in general, so she let me watch whatever, anytime. And I've just been obsessed. obsessed with monsters and scary stuff since then. And I'm actually really scared of it. I think that's what makes it so good for me. Like, I am a huge pussy. I'm legitimately frightened at most horror movies. So that makes it good. So I was like, oh yeah, I have to make a horror movie because I don't think I could make anything else. Like, I'm not very romantic. I'm not that funny. So let's do something scary. I know how to do that, I think.
I like it. Yeah, there is something about horror movies. I get caught up in them, even if they're not very good. I just get caught up in them and I get freaked out by it. And then the minute it's over, my rational brain takes over.
I couldn't do that last night, actually. I watched a movie and I don't even know what it was called. Something like Inner Demons. It's on Shudder. Some movie I hadn't seen. It actually freaked me out to the point where I had to go get Jaye and be like, hey, I can't be by myself right now. I'm kind of like nervous. I think someone's going to murder me. Actually let that freak me out for the first time in a really long time.
There are some of those. I'm a little bit bummed that I'm not going to Days of the Dead in Louisville. Are you going to Louisville?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, because they're doing a photo op with Tony Todd.
Yes. Candyman is the scariest.
That scared the shit out of...
Yes. I still can't look in a mirror. If somebody shuts the lights out, I'm out of there. Like, as fast as I can.
I think I could maybe do it now, but I know when that came out, it was impossible. I could not watch that movie and then go stand and look in a mirror and say Candyman 5 times.
No way. Never
No
doing
way.
it.
I got to twice. That was it. That's all I could do was twice.
People always joke around with me like, don't joke around. I'm out of here. You go get killed. I gotta go.
Peace out.
I already see the bees. I gotta go.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite horror movies?
Ooh, definitely all-time favorite is Pumpkinhead. I don't know if you know Pumpkinhead, but it is like the scariest creature of all time.
I have not seen it, but I know of it.
Find you some Pumpkinhead and get to watch it. That is the best. I mean, it scares the crap out of me. Return of the Living Dead is amazing. Oh gosh, there's so many. Pet Sematary 2 is one of my favorites, even though like a lot of people make fun of it. I don't know. I'm a huge Eddie Furlong fan. I don't know if you know Eddie, but he was like my crush when I was young. I had posters of him all on my walls. He's the kid from Terminator 2.
Yeah.
He was hot.
What is that one about?
Have you seen the original Pet Sematary?
Yeah, I've seen the original. First I played with Mommy, and then I played with Judd, that creepy fucking little kid.
Yeah, so in the second one, Eddie Furlong moves to a new town because his parents, like his mom, dies in this horrible accident and he lives with his dad who's a vet. And of course, there's all kinds of shenanigans. There's a dog that they have to bury and like a crazy stepdad. It's just maybe one of the cheesiest, but it's just the soundtrack is good and it's just so good.
I love it. What else?
Ooh, oh gosh. I hate this. Well, I can name like 100 movies when I'm not telling people what I like. Now I don't even know.
Do you have a favorite type of horror? Like, is there something that you really particularly like in terms of like subgenres?
Probably just anything serial killer, honestly. I mean, I guess that's probably why I made a movie about it. Like Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. It's almost hard to watch because it's so well done and so disturbing. And I like anything like rapey. I know that sounds awful to say, but like Hills Have Eyes and like I Spit on Your Grave. Those kind of gross rapey things. And Cabin Fever is cool, and anything Eli Roth does I usually like.
So let's talk a little bit about your movie. Let's talk about how did you come up with the premise of She Was So Pretty?
Honestly, Jaye came over to do a photo shoot for his band, and I had never met him prior to it. The minute he left, called my friend, and I was like, I just met this guy. He's in his band, and I think he's a serial killer. His mannerisms were so weird. The way he interacted with me was weird, and he just made me feel creepy. I
love it.
So I wrote a short story about it because I was just like, oh my God, like this guy's weird. He's so weird. And then I hit him up on Facebook and I was like, hey, you want to watch a movie sometime? Because I like getting murdered. I mean, he was good looking, so that didn't, like, I was like, maybe he's not a killer and he's cute. We hung out and watched a horror movie because he's a huge horror fan. Then we became friends and I was like, hey, I wrote this short story I'm turning into a script. You want to play a serial killer in a movie? And he loved the idea and was totally down. And so we just started like making a horror movie. It was very weird. It's weird because then I started dating him and then everybody was like, so you're dating the guy that you thought was a serial killer.
So I don't know if you saw that, but during Days of the Dead, I was doing like a live broadcast on Facebook and I was showing off some of the pictures that I had and I didn't know where the Ken Foree photo came from. And I was like, I don't know what this film is. And then I started, for some reason I was talking about your movie and I had the other picture, the picture that you guys gave me.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is the guy from She Was So Pretty. I was like, I saw him in the elevator and he's super hot. And as I'm saying that, he commented on the video to say that the picture was from The Devil's Rejects. And I was like, oh, hi, awkward.
no, he loves compliments, so, he can live with that.
Of course, he's a man. They love.
Yeah.
Stroke that ego. Just stroke the ego.
Yeah, we were actually driving back and we were watching your video.
I'm obsessed with Facebook Live. I'm a little bit obsessed. I'm not as much as I used to be, but...
I want to be obsessed. Like, I want to be good at it, because, like, I found what you did to be super interesting. Like, I loved looking at the stuff that you purchased. I loved hearing about your weekend, and I was like, that's such a good idea. Like, why didn't I do that? And then I was like, it's not going to be as entertaining.
Yeah. I just drink a lot, and I just whip on the camera and see what happens.
Yeah, it's dangerous for me. I feel like I'm naked if I'm doing that, so I can't do that.
Just let go and let God. That's all you can do. So this film is billed as being like a horror movie made on a $0 budget. Yes. In a sort of technical, practical, utilitarian way. Explain exactly what that means.
It means, as a photographer, I already owned a Nikon D3200, which is your basic camera that you can buy at Walmart. Most soccer moms own them. They're like, I think when I got it, it was like $600, but now I think you can get them for almost like $300 with a lens and like everything you would need to like start it up. And so we just used what I had. I mean, I had that camera, I had 2 lenses, no sound equipment. I collect a bunch of weird old crap. Like I have old tools and furniture and just weird stuff because I like it. And so we just used what I had. And I called up my friends and I said, hey, do you want to be in a horror movie? And they were like, yeah, we'll do it. And I called up all my artist friends and I said, hey, you want to draw some shit for a horror movie? And they were like, yeah. So we just all collaborated and made this cool thing for nothing.
I love that. People have this idea that you can't, whether it's making a movie or, doing a podcast or starting a YouTube channel, they think that you have to have thousands and thousands of dollars of equipment. And certainly there's some equipment, but a lot of people have some of the things that they need already. It's just deciding you're going to do it and deciding that it's not about perfection. It's about let's do something we love and something we enjoy.
Yeah. I met a few people at the convention that said, oh my gosh, I thought I was too old to do this. I didn't think I had the ability. And I'm like, I mean, what's it hurt to try? If you already have a camera or you know someone that's willing to let you use one, or you could rent one or whatever, step one and write a little script. And if you get that done and you had a good time doing it, well, maybe call some friends and cast for it and then start shooting it. And if you keep getting past all these little steps and you're having a good time, keep going until you hate it. And then if you never hate it, then you were meant to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's always, if you're a decent sized town that's got even like a community theater, there's somebody that's going to want to be in a movie. There's somebody Absolutely. That's going to be willing.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, it's not going to be perfect. Like a lot of people, we never really expected people to see our movie. It was more like something we were doing just for us. And then a friend of ours was like, hey, submit it to Days of the Dead. Why not? And I was like, oh yeah, hey, why not? And so I was like, well, they're just going to tell me to blow off. Well, they were like, no, we want it. And I was like, what? Okay. Then it just became like a thing. People started liking it. We didn't even have sound equipment. So we shot the whole thing with the cameras like sound. And so yeah, people were like, we can't even hear it sometimes. That's because I'm standing in the woods and the people are really far away and I don't have a microphone. This is literally whatever my camera heard, that's what you're going to hear.
Yeah.
We were just winging it, a lot of people love that vigilantiness of it, but the reviewers are like, oh, it's shaky. And I'm like, well, that's because when I'm walking around that old beat up junk store, it's called Rinks, it's in our town, and we're not allowed to film in there. I didn't ask. I just held the camera really low and like hid it behind my purse. We walked through the store and looked like Alfie was really just following this girl around. It was all just really, really vigilante.
I love it. I have to say that the female main character, Valerie, mm-hmm. she goes through a face journey like nothing I have ever seen. She doesn't always talk a lot, but yes. There's something happening on her face all the time.
It's funny because we did some scenes where I had her do lines, and I wrote a script and then we didn't use it. All my friends, they're better like improving. So we were like, screw that. Say what you want. Just follow these guidelines. We did a few scenes where she would like dream or like be like, get off of me. And it just didn't sound good. Like she'd only been in a couple other things acting wise, so it sounded forced. And I was like, well, maybe if you're just more quiet and you're just like, you realize that if you play along, you're going to get out faster. We were like, use your face instead. Well, she did. And she modeled for photography. So she was used to using a lot of face stuff, especially when she was doing horror photography. Because, if you're going to do a picture where a guy's murdering you, you really have to sell it with the big, like, eyes and the big, face. So sometimes her face oversold because she was used to overselling it.
I thought it was great. I thought there was something about it that just fit with this awkwardness, like the sort of strangeness of that character, and with it almost was like there was like she and Alfie almost had this sort of similar kind of vibe to them. So then when they come together, there's this interesting sort of parody that happens between the two of them.
Yeah, there was a lot of weird trust stuff. Like, luckily we had all been friends prior to that, so it wasn't as awkward for them. I mean, nobody wants to have anyone really lick their eyeball if they're not into it, I guess.
Not a typical day at work. Yeah.
So, you know, it's still a little awkward. And there's actually a lot of outtakes that didn't make it in where she spits in Alfie's face. And we had to do the take like 12 times or something. So poor Jerry got spit in his face like 12 different times. And she was a terrible spitter. So we just had to keep shooting it over and over because she couldn't ever fully reach the spot we wanted her to spit in. It was not pretty. But they had a good chemistry in a gross way, I guess.
Tell me a little bit about the response to She Was So Pretty. So you said it got accepted into Days of the Dead. What other kinds of response have you gotten from people?
You know what? The craziest one for us, I decided to submit to this new film festival in Columbus, Ohio called Nightmares Film Fest. It was like our first film festival besides Days of the Dead. I was like, really? Like, I'm never getting into this. This is a huge deal. The movies would play at the Gateway Film Center, which is this gorgeous, huge theater, and it's all impressive and gorgeous. When I got an email saying that we had been accepted as one of the 8 features they were going to show there for the festival, I like lost my mind. Just like, not us. We're going to get there and it'll be like, oh, just kidding, you guys sucked. And like, it just blew my mind. And then we got there and the film, it showed on a Saturday before the awards, and everyone there was so awesome and supportive. They were just like making me feel incredible about what I made, and I'm still in awe. Like, I still don't realize that I'm good at this. And so people telling me all this kind of blows my mind. Well, then I think the craziest thing was when they said, all right, it's award time. And I watched all these awards and they nominated us for 3 things. We had Best Thriller, Best Actress, and Best Director. So I was like, they're just being nice, like putting us in one of those. That's nice of them. I stopped paying attention to the screen because they show this big screen and they circle your name if you win. And I'm not looking. And they announced me as the winner of Best Director. I'm just like, whoa. Jerry's tapping me. He's like, you gotta go. I'm like, go where? He's like, you won. You have to go down there. So I go down in front of all these people in this theater and I get this really incredible award that's so beautiful. They're like, here you go. And they hand me a microphone. So I look out at the crowd and I go, I think I'm gonna vomit. And then I yell, fuck yeah, horror. And I run away. So I think, like, people's reactions people are really into it. More into it than I thought they would ever be. I think people are inspired by the fact that, one, I'm a woman, which is crazy to me that we're still in a time where it's shocking that a woman can do something. But also, like, everyone thinks I'm 12, which also is crazy. I'm 35, so people think I'm much younger than that. They're like, wow, this 12-year-old female made this great horror movie, and they like lose their mind over it. Reaction has been insanely awesome. Yeah, we have some haters online and people who would troll us or whatever, but I just feel like that comes with the territory of doing anything creative. But beyond that, I think support's been awesome.
Yeah, the internet is just proof that humanity is awful and should probably be destroyed.
Right?
Mentioning that, I met you guys at Days of the Dead. Mm-hmm. Do you do a lot of horror conventions?
Right now, we are super faithful to Days of the Dead. I used to attend a lot of horror conventions, but with the movie, we're only screening right now at Days of the Dead. I haven't submitted to any of the other ones just because I feel like Days of the Dead has done everything for us. Giving me my first shot to show my movie, letting us do any kind of crazy thing we want. Like the last time we bought beer and cupcakes for the audience. They let us do live commentary. Like, I just don't think other places are as open to creativity and filmmakers doing stupid things to like get people to come watch their movie. We've been very faithful to them. I'm sure after the second one comes out, we'll start branching out into the wild a little more.
This is something that's fairly new to me. My first ever horror convention was last year at Indianapolis at Days of the Dead. Mm-hmm. And since then I've been to Atlanta and then back to Indianapolis. And I found Days of the Dead by accident and just showed up, and it's a pretty fantastic little event.
Yeah. I've done other horror conventions and they just don't have the same atmosphere. Days of the Dead is, I've said it like a million times, but it's like a weirdo family. I've never felt more loved and accepted at that place than anywhere else in the world, you know?
It is kind of like a weird family, and that's what they told me when I was at Indy last year. So they're like, oh, you're part of the family now and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, okay, I have a background in community theater and I've done a few shows and things. And when you do a community theater show, when you're in the show, you get super close with the cast and everybody's like, oh my God, we're going to be close forever. And we're going to do reunions of Ruthless the musical, you know, every 3 months for the rest of our lives and all this shit. And then you get done and of course it all kind of falls apart and you still know the people. You lose that closeness. And so I had gone to Indianapolis. I went to Atlanta and there were people who saw me who had seen me in Indianapolis and they're like, what, you don't tell us you're coming? You just show up? And I'm like, oh, they meant it. They're like, seriously, they're like, why don't you tell us these things? We would have asked you when you were coming. We'd have picked you up at the airport. So it is like this weird kind of family dynamic that I think is really cool.
Yeah, I love it. It's crazy and helps out too in the creative world because, you know, you meet all these people who have all these amazing skills and also love the exact same stuff as you. You know, you can just, it's a huge networking party. And if everybody sticks together, we're like a huge force to be reckoned with.
And you mentioned being on the Indie Filmmakers panel at Indianapolis. And that was one thing that I noticed because of the 3 that I've been to. Obviously, I haven't been to a ton of them. But, you know, Indianapolis last year, all dudes. Atlanta, all dudes. And then I was like, fine, okay, so we've got a woman, we're starting to break it down. So I was like, there's a little diversity, there's a little bit happening. But is that common? Like when you go to these different conventions, do you see a lot of women who are making horror, who are talking about horror, who are being part of those, not just as a fan, but also as a creator and as somebody who's sort of contributing to that genre?
I know we're out there. I was on one panel with another chick named Stephanie Hensley, so she's out there. But there are a few, and I know coming up in the world, there are a decent amount, you know, in Hollywood that are trying to push their way in, but it has been. It's usually me and a lot of dudes on those panels, and I wish there were more ladies, because it really is a different perspective altogether. I mean, yeah, we all go through the same things to a point, but being taken seriously as a woman is a really weird situation when it comes to horror. People expect you to make a movie that, oh, you didn't have any strong female characters, or the girls were just victims, and it's like, well, welcome to real life. Not all chicks are gonna be able to overpower a man. That's not gonna be the case, you know? You gotta think about, I want to make this as real as possible. So I think sitting on those panels, you know, people are kind of scrutinizing you as a woman, or they love you more, because then you also get, like, the creeper factor, you know, the dudes that hit you up after, hey, girl, like, here's a dick pic kind of thing, and, you know, that's fun.
Yeah. I like that, because I think that there's something to that. There's this idea of, because you're sort of representing women on this panel, they expect you to then become the sort of firebrand feminist filmmaker. And it's like, you know, part of the reality is just that, you know, sometimes for women just in the real world, things are fucking scary. And so that's part of the horror, that horror of everyday life, that just like, these are the kinds of things that can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And sitting on those panels, the dudes make a lot of jokes, not necessarily appropriate, you know, and as the strong woman on the panel, like, do I join the boys club and laugh at the joke, you know, or am I like, oh, you disgusting pig, or do I ignore it? There's a lot of expectation. Oh, should I stand up for women, or is that going to make them not want me involved? You know, it's a lot of pressure, really, to like try to fit in and not piss people off, but also stand up for yourself, you know, not a pushover, but still a business in the end.
I did enjoy that your booth was sort of the opposite. That's one thing I've noticed in the vendor rooms. There's always the table, and they have the DVDs and the Blu-rays all stacked up and all that stuff. And you have the director who's a dude, and then you have your booth babe, the star of the movie or whatever. And I love that you were there, you were the director, and then you had Jerry. He was your booth babe.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of the opposite.
That's the best part. Like, and we don't really have a traditional booth. A lot of people invest a lot of money to make their booth really shiny with the slickest posters and the nicest little TV and the nicest tablecloth. And I'm like, how do I make my booth look like shit? I want my booth to feel like when you walk up to it that you're walking up to a serial killer's booth. Like, I want it to feel like that. I don't know. I get a lot of compliments on the fact that it looks like a woman set it up because it's very, like, detailed and artsy craftsy, I guess. But I mean, I take that as a compliment. Like, I put in that extra time to make it really personal towards the movie.
It feels like a part of the movie. It's got that same sort of aesthetic to it, so it's not just the slick, here's our stuff, buy our shit, move along, like keep the line moving, that sort of thing. It's definitely, you can tell that you're at your booth. Because some of the other ones, they kind of blend together. I mean, you know, all of these movies, they kind of, it just is the pile of DVDs or whatever, and it's just kind of like one table, and then you go to the next, and you go to the next, and I thought yours had some personality. I thought it was more fun.
Thank you. I want to deliver an experience. I built 3 different haunted houses locally, and that eventually what I want to do is start my own huge haunted house here in our area. I'm raising money for that. I think that experience is what makes people remember you and come back. If I can make it feel like you're standing in a horror movie when you come to my table, then you may stop back by or at least want to stand there for more than 1 second.
Let's talk a little bit about the sequel. So you have a sequel to She Was So Pretty coming out. What's it about? Give us the not too spoilery rundown of the sequel.
It's called She Was So Pretty to Be Good for Goodness Sake, and it's a Christmas horror film. It happens during the holiday season, which is nice, and Alfie is back, and he is teamed up with, well, who he's teamed up with at the end of the first one, I'll just say that, so that everybody who hasn't seen it still doesn't get ruined. They join together and they go on a spree of home invasions, and Alfie in it has given up looking for love and has just decided to be a crazy psychotic murderer. But sometimes when you stop looking for love, that's when you find it. So that's all I can say about that. But I will say that it's super holiday filled. I will say there is no snow in it because this was like the year of 0 snow here in our area, which sucked. To make up for it, I decorated the crap out of it. It's so vintage Christmas. And oh gosh, how do I sell it without giving anything away? There's some of the grossest things I've ever done, even compared to the first one. There's one scene that I think is going to make people vomit, so I can't wait for that.
I love it. I'm excited to see it. Where are you at in the process?
Oh, we are in editing mode. We will be finished by September, and then we will premiere it in October at a festival. Can't say which one, but hopefully it's going to be incredible. Then we'll have a December release for VOD and DVD and Blu-ray and all the things. And I'm hoping, this may be a little early to mention, but I'm hoping to premiere it at Days of the Dead in Chicago. It'll be a little early treat for everybody who makes it out to Chicago to get before anyone else peek at it.
So one thing that I noticed about the first one, and so I'm wondering if this maybe carries over into the sequel, and maybe you can tell me a little bit about where this might have come from or how this fits in with the kind of story, is that as I was watching it, I almost kind of felt like there were 2 stories happening. So there's Alfie's story, and then there is Valerie and her friends, and then of course her friends when they're looking for her and those kinds of things. They almost felt like 2 different movies to me. Like they felt like 2 different kinds of stories, and then they have something that kind of ties them together at the end. Was that on purpose? And is there anything about that that's going to kind of feed into the sequel?
There's actually almost 3 stories in the sequel. I love that idea of meeting characters outside of a moment and then bringing it all back together kind of thing. So that's definitely happening on purpose. It definitely happens again in the sequel. I think there's just a ton of movies like 4 Rooms. I don't know if you've ever seen that. There's a lot of movies out there like that I love that have that like, oh, we're all different characters living our lives and then eventually we all run into each other and it makes a movie kind of thing. So I guess yes, you will see it again.
Nice. 4 Rooms is the one with the bellhop, right? And he goes to the Florida different.
Yes.
It's got Madonna in it.
Yes, it's such a good movie.
So tell me a little bit about, you said you do photography full time, and I've seen some of your photos on Facebook and things. So tell me a little bit about what you do with photography.
Currently, I work for a few different fashion brands. I don't really say them because then people go looking for it, and I'm like behind the scenes and low key. I usually just photograph what I call lips and hip, which is like the photos of people wearing their t-shirts and, you know, just pictures of their shirts and pants, you know, just for the websites and stuff. I'm hoping to break into some of the artsy stuff later where I can actually do their lookbooks and things. I shoot a lot of nude stuff, burlesque, and, you know, any kind of risque photography. I like that. Anything that looks really vintage. Right now I'm focused on the 70s. I'm shooting a whole lookbook of 70s looks in an arcade. I'm hoping to do a gallery showing for those once they're all completed, which will be really cool. I don't do your typical senior portraits or pictures of babies or that kind of stuff. I've done a few weddings and they made me wish I was dead. That's just not for me. Naked ladies over weddings all day.
You're not all for chasing down the bride and like, smile.
Oh, it's so hard.
Get all those bitches that you hate around you so you can all take a group picture.
Yes. And I shot a wedding recently and they love, oh, we love your style. It's going to be great. We can't wait. It's all vintage. Looks so good. And then I finished the pictures and sent them back and they were like, oh, why are these grainy and why are they all weird and old looking? I'm like, what? That's what I do.
Yeah, remember that thing that you said you liked? Then I did that. And
then you were like, oh, wait, these aren't your standard, just like crisp photo? No, because I don't want to shoot that way. That's why I don't do weddings. Like, and you insisted I do yours, and now here we are.
And now we're having awkwardness because you don't know what the fuck I do with my life. So.
Yeah.
Have you ever shot any fabulous drag queens?
No, I have not, and I want to. And I was actually going to ask you if you would be interested in doing like a quickie shoot at whatever Days of the Dead you're going to be at next.
Absolutely. I'm always ready to pose. Always.
You have so many good looks, and I was like, man, if I could just get away, I could see some of these sweet looks.
And I work with a photographer around here. Her name is Miranda, and she's fantastic. And I met her at Art Fest, which is this art festival that they have in our town here. And I knew that I would love her because I was going around and I'm looking at all the booths and it's like fucking sunsets and sunflowers and all this kind of bullshit. And then I get to her booth and this huge picture right in front of her booth is a picture of this baby in a pile of trash.
Yes.
And I was like, that's fantastic. And apparently people were so mean to her about this thing. And she's like, look, it's my sister's baby. My sister put it in the trash, so fuck off. Like, it's none of your business. And so I was like, I like you. I want to work with you. And so she's done most of my photos. Whenever I do a big photo shoot around here, it's always with her because she's got this fun, like, creepy aesthetic where, when she's not photographing big, beautiful drag queens, she's like finding dead animals and like putting them in vintage furniture and taking pictures and stuff.
Yes, I love all of that. I love people. I mean, it's hard to make a career out of that kind of thing, especially when I live here in Parkersburg. There's a niche. Like, if you can find the people, they exist in your town. So you can find work. And then you just travel outside. I just travel a lot for work, so I don't mind.
Is there much of a drag scene around there?
We used to have a huge drag scene. It was incredible. I would actually go out every weekend to a drag show, and there were some really, really good drag queens here. And we even had some drag kings. We had a few different pageants and things. They would bring in like famous drag queens to perform. And my mom is a huge fan of drag, so like I would take her out to these shows, and she'd have like the best time of her life. We had some great ones. There was a drag king that did Tim McGraw. Gage Gatlin, I don't know. I don't know how far the drag scene, grows outside of West Virginia, but Gage Gatlin is this drag king that does Tim McGraw, and my mom was just like infatuated. She got her picture taken and was just like, oh my god, he's so handsome. Only you know that's a girl, right? My mom's like, I don't care, so hot. We had a really good scene, and then something, I don't know what happened, but every gay bar we had in town just disappeared. There were 4 at one time, which is crazy because this is not a huge area. Apparently, I don't know, it just fell off the earth. There's nowhere to go now, and our drag scene just disappeared, and it's sad because there were some beautiful, beautiful drag queens.
Gay bars all over the place have a tough time, and I think it's a weird situation because as gay and queer people, they're more accepted, they're more part of the mainstream or whatever that means, whatever the bumper sticker is all about. But as there's more acceptance and people just feel safer going out with their friends to whatever bar their friends are going to, there isn't that need for that community space. But then what happens is that bars across the country are closing down.
Yeah, I hate that because it's a different atmosphere. It just seems more fun, I guess. I like going out to a show. I like going out to see like a wild night. They would have so many crazy fun theme parties and stuff. So much better than just going to a nightclub and watching a bunch of gross dudes grind on, a bunch of drug addicts. I could skip that. I would rather watch a huge bunch of sequins parade around. Like, that's for me. Like, I want to be out in that. It doesn't exist here now. It makes me really sad.
Yeah, we don't have any kind of bar here. Our closest bars, if you go up to Canada's 2 hours away. You can go to Winnipeg and go to a bar. Or down in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, you can go down there. Or we used to have a bar in Moorhead, Minnesota, so not in North Dakota, but right on the border. And we used to do, even before we did shows, I used to go down there, and when I was first starting, and I was a busted mess. And they had this back room that eventually, when we started doing shows, became our stage area. They like ripped down a wall and made it into our stage area, but it was called the, oh god, what did they call it? I think they called it the Bear's Den, and it's where all the lesbians hung out. And all the little gay boys were so afraid to go in where the lesbians were, and I would just get tanked, and I'd be wearing some $10 Sears clearance dress, glass.
Yes.
And these 7-inch acrylic platform shoes, and I would stumble in there and be like, "What's up, bitches?" And I would just go party with the lesbians all night. It was a good time.
Heck yeah. I love drag queens when they first start out. And cause like we had a bunch that they started out but then eventually they would grow into this amazing performer. And I like the ones that lived on. Like some quit and went away and never did it again. But the ones that became amazing, it was so cool to watch that transformation of beauty. They learned how to do makeup. It was awesome.
And I think people forget, especially I think the performers themselves sometimes forget. I don't care how good you look today. I guarantee you there's some busted ass picture of you somewhere looking a hot mess. And I've got them. They are hidden away in a lockbox. They are never going to see the light of day, but they're out there.
Well, now the internet's scary. Anyone can take a photo or video of you at any time, and you don't get to approve whether that looks good or not. And they can just stick it on their Facebook or on their Instagram and be like, "Oh, I'm doing this tonight. Here's this person." And you're like, "Oh my God, I did not expect to be in the world today. Oh, wow. Great." Super.
Yeah, it's tough. And Jaye, you said he's in a band, and he did a lot of the music for the soundtrack for She Was So Pretty. Is that right?
Yes, he is in a new band. He was in a band, but it didn't work out because everyone else in the band was a dick. He's in a new band called Rat Tail, which is a fun name. They play a lot of like crazy metal and thrash and stoner metal, and I don't know what music's called anymore. I'm old. The soundtrack I'm so proud of. Jaye, he actually had a broken down amp that wasn't really working very well at all, and so he started messing with the buttons and found out we make this weird sound, and we made a song out of it. And the song that he created is actually the one that's playing during the credits, the like start of the credits. Amazing. Like, he's such a talented musician. And then during the romantic dance scene, that acoustic song that's playing during that creepy slow dance is his too. And then there's another guy that we worked with named Facehugger. He's actually from California, and he's blowing up now. He's starting to get a lot of gigs. He did all the synth stuff, which is amazing. He's so talented, it's out of control, and I'm excited to watch him blow up. He's working on music for the second one too, but it's been a little harder because he has to make it all kind of Christmassy, which is not easy, I feel like.
Metal bands don't usually have their Christmas set that they go to.
No, and so a friend of ours gave us an old keyboard that their church was throwing away. They were like, "You want this?" And we were like, "Yeah, we'll take it." We're like, "Crap." And so Jerry's like, "I'm probably going to teach myself how to play the keyboard real quick and write something for the movie." And he's just been sitting in his room just playing this weird old keyboard and recording it. And it sounds amazing. Like, it's super talented. It's gross. I hate him. I'm not musically inclined, so watching someone who is makes me mad.
I know, me too. I make it to the level of drunk karaoke every once in a while, and that's about as far as it goes.
Oh man, I can't even get to that. I'm too shy.
I do, and I got a wild hair. I don't know what happened. I made a parody song, and I don't remember how it came up exactly, but it was the Walking in a Winter Wonderland, that earworm that just gets stuck.
Oh yeah.
One of the ways that I get rid of songs when they're stuck in my head is I just start singing them with the wrong lyrics. And so somehow that Winter Wonderland was singing in my head, and all of a sudden I was like, there's snakes on this plane, and I was like, wait a minute, that's something. And so I did this whole horror movie homage to the tune of Winter Wonderland. That's my one claim to musical fame. It was pretty terrible, and I made this live video on Facebook of me in this wig and busted makeup and just this lace swimsuit cover up, and I'm singing this like crazy song. It was so bizarre. It was so bizarre.
Oh my gosh, is it still out there? Is it still in the world?
It is. It's on my website. I'll give you the link on Facebook.
Oh yes, I gotta check that out immediately.
It was cheesy. It was a good time. I had fun with it. So
that's the best. Like, I wish I could get cheesy like that. Like, I want to. It's in me. I know it is. Then I'm like, oh, but then somebody might look at me and I'd be weird.
And I'm a big, enormous parade float sized drag queen in North Dakota. So I just got used to the idea that people were going to look at me and people are going to be like, what is happening right here? What's going on?
Yeah, I love that. I have some of that confidence, but it only comes in the form of low-cut top. Like, that's as far as I get. But in our town, when I wear a V-neck, a deep V, it's over. Like, every old woman in this town wants to blow me up with her laser eyes.
I get asked to do the weirdest events, and so one time I got asked to host this social justice fundraiser, but it was put on by a local church.
Yes.
And so I'm hosting, and I'm just like going around and making sure people are having a good time. And I had this, she was nice, she was polite about it, but this kind of gray-haired woman walk up to me, and she literally just looked me up and down, and she said, "What is the purpose of you?" And that was exactly how she said it. And so I looked at her and I said, "Do you mean here tonight or like on this planet?" And she's like, either. And I was like, well, tonight I'm getting you lemonade. In the world, I'm here to take over and make people just a little bit more fabulous. And she's like, okay. And just like toddled off. I was like, okay.
Wow.
It was very bizarre. People are interesting. I'm either like ready for the nuclear apocalypse, like I'm just ready to let the cockroaches and Cher start over, or I'm just like, people fascinate me. And I'm fully aware that someday they're going to find my body in a ditch because my like, malignant crazy detector will go wrong. Because normally if I sense somebody's a little bit crazy, I'm like, that's going to be a good story. Come sit next to me.
That's me. That's why I wanted to date Jerry. I was like, oh, he's going to kill me and I can't wait. Somebody's going to tell my story.
That's right. I want to be in movies. So even if it's a documentary about the man who killed me, it'll still be my starring role.
You're on the ID channel. It's just so good.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Do you have anything else you want to tell us about? Anything interesting about you? Anything like outside of movie making, all that other kind of stuff? Just a weird, interesting little fact or a little story? Something exclusive for our Janessa After Dark listeners?
Oh my God, something exclusive. Oh no, about me. Oh God, I have no idea. I'm so weird. I'm like looking around my space right now and I'm like, God, I'm a really fucking big weirdo. I'm obsessed with Pee Wee Herman. I love him. I think he's the most incredible ever. I really want to be Miss Yvonne for Halloween, but I just don't know how to fully bring it together. I don't know if I can get the big hair, so I'm gonna have to buy a wig. I don't know if I can get it up there.
I was fascinated with her as a kid.
I'm obsessed. I collect as much as I can get. I don't know, that wasn't a very juicy secret, but I love Pee Wee Herman so much.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Yeah, you're welcome. This has been wonderful. Get out of here.
I did all the work.
Very good jerk.
Been really hard.
Love it.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with director Brooklyn Ewing, as well as a couple brief cameos from Alfie himself, Jerry LaRue. You can find out more about She Was So Pretty and the sequel, Be Good for Goodness Sake, as well as find Brooklyn's photography and the Fuck Off Metal podcast at shewassopretty.com. Now, one thing from Brooklyn's interview that really resonated with me is when she mentioned that her love of horror was born in part from her mother. I can absolutely relate to that. A lot of my early love of horror and my enjoyment of horror was supported by Mama Champagne. When I was young, I loved witches and Frankenstein and vampires, and we used to watch reruns of Dark Shadows on PBS. But although I love monsters and I loved small scares, I didn't always love horror. There are a couple of specific memories that I can think of related to horror movies when I was a kid where I was absolutely terrified. I remember that my mom had this friend named Debbie, and she had two sons, Danny and Dwayne. And one time we were out at their house watching Stephen King's Silver Bullet. I don't remember a lot of that movie, but I remember there was a scene where a woman in a nightgown is killed by the wolf. I watched that scene terrified between my fingers. I also remember that my brother had rented Nightmare on Elm Street 3. I was pretty young, but I had decided that I wanted to check it out, see what the big deal was. I popped it into the VCR, and of course he hadn't rewound it. It was right at the end showing the popsicle stick house where Nancy Thompson used to live, and the light comes on in the window. There was nothing graphic, there was nothing gory, but I shut it off. I just couldn't bring myself to watch it. And to be honest, I'm not sure where the change came, but at some point I became much more interested in this genre. One of the first movies that I remember watching and really enjoying without night terrors was Prom Night 2, Hello, Mary Lou. Initially, Mama Champagne was not going to allow me to watch it. I think she had probably had to put up with too many sleepless nights after letting me watch other horror movies. But we watched it together, and there was something about that movie that really made me enjoy that perfect combination of a little bit of blood and gore, some wanton teenage sexuality, and a whole lot of camp that really solidified my love of the horror genre. And to this day, those cheesy 80s horror films are still some of my favorites. Yes, I love it when a film also has something to say, when it's got some social commentary, or it tries to have some, quote, redeeming value. But I will always have a soft spot in my heart for those 80s classics like Prom Night 2, Cheerleader Camp, and of course my all-time favorite, the gender-bending Sleepaway Camp. And I really do have Mama Champagne to thank for allowing that love of cheesy, tasteless horror to grow and thrive. And so this episode of Janessa After Dark is dedicated to two very special people. The first of them is Mama Champagne. The second one is George A. Romero. As I'm recording this, it's just a few hours after they announced the passing of George Romero, the king of the zombie flick. Now, I've never been a huge fan of the zombie genre in general, but I love Romero's movies. I love that in the blood and the guts and the violence, there was always this very interesting thread of social commentary. Night of the Living Dead had one of the best shock endings I've ever seen in a horror movie, and it happens in a series of stills. It's all about race relations. And I think that in our time of Black Lives Matter and the racism and inequality that we still see in our society, this movie still has something to say to our culture. Of course, Dawn of the Dead was all about consumerism, with zombies overrunning a shopping mall, riding up and down on the escalators. If you don't think that that vision of the future has come true, you certainly haven't seen a pack of teenagers sitting around, faces and fingers glued to their iPhones, interacting with each other virtually and ignoring each other in the real world. And in Day of the Dead, there's another message that's still relevant and prescient for our current times. In this film, it's almost as if the zombies are a secondary threat. As Sarah and the rest of the good guys fight to keep the zombie menace out of their underground bunker, it becomes clear that the real threat is the sinister military personnel in the base, led by the increasingly unstable Rhodes. And if a story about distrusting government forces doesn't ring true with you right now, well, then you're probably not paying attention. Despite problems finding funding or attracting big-name stars, George Romero continued his series of zombie films, exploring things like zombie evolution, technology and reality television, and more. For George A. Romero, it was never just about the undead craving brains. The brains he was interested in were in his audience. Rest well, George. You'll be greatly missed by horror fans. So Mama Champagne and George A. Romero, this episode is for you. Janessa After Dark utilizes royalty-free music from bensound.com. This episode includes the tracks Actionable, which serves as our regular podcast intro, the track Creepy, which played during Brooklyn's introduction, and the track you're listening to now called Funky Element. For these tracks and more, be sure to visit bensound, that's BEN sound.com. Janessa After Dark is written by Chris M. Stoner, aka Miss Janessa J. Champagne, and is a Champagne Dreams production.